Meeting is being recorded. Good morning, everyone. My name is Frank Severic. I'm the graduate assistant at the Northwest Louisiana Archives at LSU Shreveport. Currently in the MLA program, going into my second year. And today we're going to be talking about gaming with primary sources. So the backstory into how we got into this subject, just as a quick introduction, is during my first semester as graduate assistant for Dr. McLemore, the head archivist at the Northwest Louisiana Archives, is we were looking at the issue of freshman seminars and bringing in new students. You know, these are typically in the age range of anywhere from 17 to 21 years old. They usually don't have very much exposure to an archival environment. And we were noticing they were consistently being rotated through the archives and other parts of the library, while total engagement and retainment of information seemed to be overall low. There generally wasn't very much enthusiasm in the fixed format of a lecture environment with, say, a PowerPoint, and then some minor interaction with primary sources. So we asked, how can we improve this? And we started looking into some different ideas. Okay, so am I coming through better now? I can get a little closer. I've got my mic all the way turned up. Okay, I'll sit a little closer, no problem. So we were looking on that, how do we increase engagement with these students who have a relatively low knowledge base of what archives do, what the purposes are, and even implementation of primary sources. So we started looking into implementing a game. And that's what got us onto this subject here. Eventually, I designed a gaming program that could be executed over about 50 minutes. And we got to implement this on 2 separate occasions with high school level work groups. These would have been high school juniors and seniors who came through for a workshop program through LSUS, and they became our test subjects. Overall, I noticed a much higher degree of engagement and information retainment and information application than just a straight lecture. And so I'm going to kind of run through some of the things we did and how we got to that process. And this is where the PowerPoint begins. So let's pull that up. And we'll start going through. All right. Hopefully this is working for everyone. So gaming with primary sources. Let me minimize my video here. Give me a little bit easier of a time. All right. So an introduction. We began development fall semester of 2019. I went through that. We had our classroom trials in February of 2020. We would have had more. There were more planned, but 2020 COVID, came end of March. Everything kind of shut down. But we'll tie into that a little bit later. Our target audience here with these types of activities are high school juniors and seniors or college freshmen, or in general groups of people that are getting an introduction to an archival environment in like an academic or educational setting. Activity time, it can run anywhere from 30 to 50 to 60 minutes. This is kind of dependent upon the instructor and how you implement it. And our primary goals are an introduction to the function of archives and primary source research. As many of you who are involved in the education environment are probably aware of, incoming college freshmen and even, anecdotal personal experience, the majority of undergrad students don't fully understand primary sources or how to implement them, or even how to research. So this was a good learning opportunity to get in and get these students engaged with the subject material. And in the case of the high school juniors and seniors, it was also a very good opportunity to start larger discussions about research in general and post-secondary or college education. So some of the challenges for those of you who are in this environment, and why we look to activities like this to increase engagement is things like low student enthusiasm or low information retention, just in general, getting a difficult process of engagement with these students. And then this can be further complicated by a lack of clear focus on maybe cross-disciplinary aspects, but we'll get more into that later. So we're going to establish the goals of our activity. So first of all, we want to understand primary sources. We want to try and foster this kind of thinking with them so that they, first of all, understand what a primary source is, and 2, how to find them. A familiarization with archival purpose and practices. So most of these students don't, surveying the crowds, they didn't seem to really have an understanding of the function of archives. So how this activity went down was I did a brief 5 to 10 minute lecture at the beginning with the aid of a projector and PowerPoint slides to kind of do a introduction to, say, our content database systems, the library websites, the archives website, and some examples of what kind of information they might be looking for. As you might expect, for those of you who've had experience in this, there was very little enthusiasm during the, so that was to be expected, though. That was okay. The classrooms had no idea an activity was coming, so that element of surprise for individuals looking to implement these kind of activities can work to your benefit. So we're looking for an application of archival resources, cross-disciplinary opportunities. One of the reasons I have this up here is, and I don't think this is specific to LSUS as a campus, is there seems to be a void in cross-disciplinary interactions, and institutions like archives or the library, they play a central role to a lot of different academic disciplines, that you have this opportunity while you have these students in one place to start forming these connections. The goal here is organizational in nature in getting instructors and professors on board with creating activities. So in the process of implementing this activity, we've taken that responsibility away from the instructor, and we've gone ahead and taken the initiative to start that ourselves here in the archives. The last of these 5 goals is what I'm calling genuine engagement, which I think is kind of the most important. And we'll get into what that means. So, what is genuine engagement? We need to kind of operationalize this, kind of define it into some terms we can understand, so we know what we want to get out of this activity. So first, we've got the application of research tools. Through this, we're seeing that the students are able to, utilize the tools that they're at their disposal. In the case of this activity, they were not working online, but it can be transitioned to that. But we wanted to see, some genuine research on their part, a synthesis of this primary source information. So not only, finding the information, but taking that information that is completely new to them and applying it in a problem-solving aspect. And then student-generated inquiries. So this is, non-instructor prompted, inquiries from the students, or sort of organic discussion that's arising, organic curiosity. So with the application, the synthesis, and the inquiry, I believe that we arrive to what I'm calling genuine engagement, which is our goal. But there's a step further, and this is our follow-up interactions. Once we have our genuine engagement from the students in the activity, once they seem to understand some of the materials, we can then go to a point that we get follow-up interactions post-activity, and more importantly, follow-up interactions in the future where these students come back to the archives, come back to utilizing these resources, and apply them later on in their degree programs, or so we hope. So the activity. So what did we do? How did we gamify the archives? We looked at some pre-existing educational games for K through 12 programs. A lot of these relied on like physical devices or aspects to be placed within the game. For instance, like some of you may be familiar with lockbox type games where the classroom works together to solve puzzles. As they solve puzzles, they open physical boxes, and this, allows the activity to proceed. This is the progression method, is these physical unlocking boxes. So we kind of took that concept and took it a little bit of a different direction. And instead of a physical box, we've created kind of an abstract box through cryptography, through a cipher. So the activity, how did we do this? Our format. So we're looking at groups of 3 to 6 individuals. You can scale that up, you can scale that down. This is up to the instructor and the type of group setting you have. Personally, I found no more than, I found 6, especially with like high schoolers or teenagers, is about the right, like that's about your maximum. Anything over that is going to devolve probably into hijinks. And we kind of want to avoid that. So groups of 3 to 6, cryptographic puzzle substitution-based Caesarean ciphers. So that's a really complicated way of saying it's just a simple substitution-based cryptographic puzzle. And I'll show you an example in just a moment. The reason I went for this route is most of the students don't have any exposure to this, and it eliminates the need for these physical aids within the game. So that's one physical element that might be a roadblock to implementing this that you can remove through the use of a more abstract cryptographic puzzle. So there's 3 rounds of these unique puzzles for each group. Each round has an increasing complexity to the puzzle. And there's an inclusion of chance-based mini games. This is something that I added to drive more student interaction. I noticed it was very popular. So by chance-based mini games, in this instance, it was the simple implementation of a 20-sided dice and allowing the students to compete against the instructor for a reward in the form of solving a piece of their cryptographic puzzle for their group should they win. I noticed just about every student wanted to participate in this activity. And I think that comes from, 1, the element of chance, 2, the element of competition, and then 3, like, there is an attraction for students to, engage in this competition with a perceived authority figure. So you're kind of playing on this that's already present in these teenagers to begin with. And then at the very end, each group has a final puzzle, which, unbeknownst to every group, this was the same for the sake of fairness. With the increasing complexity of the 3 rounds leading up, it became difficult to give each group their own unique final puzzle and to keep an air of fairness within the game. Because once you get into this, this cryptographic cipher, you see how things could quickly unravel and become a lot more complicated if you're not paying attention as an instructor to how you design it. One of the ways I personally addressed this was creating overlapping relevant content, which I'll show you an example of in a moment. And then finally, the reward, the incentive. For me, this was as simple. What I did was I ordered some aviator sunglasses off of Amazon. They're like $2 or $3 a piece. I really only had to reward one of, the winning team from each group, and total investment for the entire workshop on the prizes was, about $16. I think that was a fair trade. But, the rewards or incentivization, if you are an instructor or an educator and are more familiar with these groups of students or participants, you can tweak that how you want. Figure out something that appeals to them. I found the aviator sunglasses were a hit. Kids loved it. So here's an example of our cipher. As you'll notice, they were provided with blank spaces that correspond to cryptographic keys. And so looking into it, most of the students, at the beginning, they had no idea what they were looking at. So we had to do just a small discussion on the substitution nature of this alphabet. But once things got going, they tend to get the hang of it. So this is just a one-to-one substitution with I've credited him here. This is actually a creative writing project that was done by one of my fellow grad students. And so this is an invented language, but you could use, just the English alphabet and do a substitution cipher and be just fine. So our how did the activity go? So 2 of the puzzle exercises utilize city directories. I wanted to engage them with something that I knew would frequently be referenced by a lot of researchers coming in, and something as a utility that's, relevant locally, and would perhaps tie into some things they already knew about their community. So we started with the city directories. We provided 2 different puzzles for the groups, and the way I did that to increase difficulty is I recycled the same materials. So for instance, the type of location and the street within the 4 groups that I had split the 2 classes into. So the reason I did that is it can help me contain the complexity of the puzzles that I'm providing to them. And it gives at the end of the activity, it will give us a shared knowledge basis for the entire class. So every group is familiar with certain concepts, such as, in this example, we went with theaters and the Sanger Theater on 61820 and 620 Milam. So this would have created familiarization with the Sanger Theater, a familiarization with Milam Street and downtown Shreveport, and city directories. This tied in later to after the activity. There was an exhibit of demo materials that I had provided, mostly in the form of old maps and photographs, things that we could encapsulate and have the public interact with without too much worry of damage. So one example would be going through here. A team would have to look up, say, theaters and locate it via the name of the theater. And then another team may get another question where they have to work around the question a different way and go in through the actual street address and find Sanger Theater. And then last, the third tier of the puzzles was implementing, interacting with maps to synthesize information. So they would be given a series of instructions. For example, on this map, the clue may have been, this street lies between Dalzell and Prospect in the Highland neighborhood. So the neighborhoods on this map are listed. That's a little clue for them to look in. If they're particularly astute young people with their surroundings, some of them may already know. So just as a highlight, there we have it. It's Prospect between Dalzell and Robinson. The map was probably, surprisingly, the more challenging of the 2 I found. That was an interesting observation. I was not expecting that. That may have just been specific to those 2 classes. So again, we get back to our puzzle, and now they've had the resources via the 3 increasing grades of difficulty to solve this cipher. For the final cipher, there are no clues. The final cipher should be a representation of the 3 puzzles that have preceded it with repeating elements. So by the time they've reached this 4th tier, the final tier, if they accumulate all of the puzzles they've done so far, they should have every single character represented so far. So this isn't like an impossible task for the class to compete. It's just abstract, and they're not used to it. So some of my observations of what we went through, and I'm trying to keep an eye on the time. I think we've got about 9 minutes left. So we're coming to the end, I promise. We're getting there. So observations, our difficulty. This is something I wrestled with, was, how do we implement something that is challenging enough to keep interest, but not too challenging to lose interest, or adversely, too easy to, you'll lose interest. So a simple thing to keep in mind is with your puzzles, keep them simple, grounded, and relevant. Try to theme all of your material around something central, and try not to get too abstract with your clues. Try to make them as direct as possible, especially for, in this case, high school seniors. A cryptographic cipher was a little more difficult than I was expecting for most of the students. Now, I did have one group that solved the final puzzle early. That created a problem. So in the future, I'll probably, I'll try to make that final puzzle a little more complicated. Maybe not quite so easy. The activity completion. So 7 of the 8 total groups completed their final puzzle within the time limit without any direct instructor assistance. There was only one group that seemed to be having enough trouble that, I went up to help them directly come to the conclusion that they needed to. Of course, that didn't allow them to win the competition, which, if I hadn't made clear already, this is a competitive game. Like, these teams are competing against each other in each class to get to the answer first of the final puzzle. Now, there may be some differences of opinion, like whether or not you would like to implement this way into your activities. But personally, I find that the element of group competition increase the direct interaction with the students. Now there will be some difficulties you're going to notice in there as an instructor, and this kind of comes down to you in being aware of your classroom space, being aware of your activity space, and being aware of the state, like the mind state of your students. For example, you know, you're dealing with a group of, in this case, high school students who come from a wide variety of socioeconomic backgrounds. They have, you know, various different life stories and life challenges that are happening with them, and they're all in different academic progressions. So you need to kind of address some of these problems early in the group process. What I would do is try to interact with every table throughout every activity, not necessarily to provide them answers, but to try and look and see, you know, I'm going to use the word like problem participant right now, but I want to remove the negative connotation from that. It's more of, this is a low social or low peer engagement participant, and how do we drive up that peer engagement to create better group teamwork results? For me, the way I did that was by purposefully going to those tables and addressing the table while standing proximally closest to this student that I felt was, you know, kind of low on social engagement, without directly engaging with that student. You know, you don't want to put them on the spot. You don't want to, you know, make an issue out of it. But that proximal closeness and the addressing of the group and getting them on task, it seemed to help. Again, that's anecdotal, but it worked for me. So 5 or more students examined demo Archival exhibits after the activity with questions. I think this falls up into that follow-up that I'm looking for. And then 2 or more students, and this, to me, this was the most important. I've done several small exhibits so far and small interactive events and some freshman seminars. And usually after each one of these activities, if I get 1 or 2 people that come after the activity and have more in-depth discussions, I consider that a victory. So 2 or more students initiated follow-up discussions related to lesson activity, archival research, or higher education. Considering this was a high school group and we were presenting at a college, I was very interested in generating those discussions. Importantly, for everyone looking to implement this in your environment and the changes post-COVID, well, I guess we're still in it, but you know, the changing classroom of 2020, does it scale? I would say yes. Like my argument is it absolutely can scale, but this comes into the work on the instructor and how you decide to implement it. For example, if you're going to scale an activity like this to a digital classroom, I think you would find a lot of difficulty in group work. I think that would present a lot of challenges. And so you'd have to go on a more individualistic basis where each individual gets their own set of ciphers and they go to solve it. And you would have to do like a digitally curated assessment of items. I know, you know, if we were to implement that here, when students go to interact with our content databasing system, you know, there's a certain wall you're going to hit in that inquiry. Specifically here, once you get into the collection inventories, that's about the highest level of detail you're going into the collection through the database management system. So that would require some extra work on my end to put some supplemental research materials together to get them to go through. But looks like we're coming up on time. I'm going to wrap it up there. I have a lot of other anecdotes and stuff I could talk about, but I think I hit all the points and open it up for Q&A.
So Frank, I don't know if you want to look at the chat yourself, but you do have one or a 2-part question from Michelle, if you think you have time to address that.
Absolutely. Yeah, let me open it up. I didn't have the chat up while I had this on the screen. Okay, let's see. Do you mind sharing your files with me? Yes, I can make the PowerPoint available, and depending on where you want to go, I can work with you on some other stuff. And sharing activity with any of the high schools or uni survey classes. Okay, we're trying to implement this in another freshman environment here to get some more testing in. I think this could be refined a little more, but absolutely, I think this is an activity that any instructor, you take the fundamentals of this cryptographic cipher, utilizing research materials to synthesize information to solve a puzzle, you can really apply it to any discipline. For example, I come from a criminal justice background. My undergraduate is in criminal justice, and I'm in the Master's of Liberal Arts now. Well, we had designed a project like that, an activity like this for criminal justice students, if we could get the instructors on board, where the criminal justice students would come in with essentially a puzzle that would direct them through city directories, police jury records, and city council records to try and put together a narrative so that they could solve essentially like their murder case in their murder mystery, you know? So you could really like apply this to a lot of different things. It just depends on how much time as an instructor you have to put in. In the digital format, it's going to be a lot more difficult because, for example, if I was going to do that murder investigation, that would entail me as the instructor or the activity leader going into these city directories, going in these police jury files, scanning documents, building a document repository, and then sharing this with the students. I hope that answered those questions.
We are actually coming to the end of the session, so if anyone has any further questions, speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, and it does look like, Frank, that Cindy is also interested in your file. So if you would either like get in contact with each other, if you have to send something to the listserv and kind of be like, Frank, where are you? But yeah, this is a great presentation.
I like that.
Oh, great. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, that was good.
I hope it was clear.
Yes, I'm very jealous. I wish I had something like this when I was in high school, because I would have,
right?
I would have enjoyed it. But thank you, everyone. I will see you all, well, whoever wants to, hopefully at session 3 in about 15 minutes. And thank you again, Frank, for presenting.
Appreciate it. Thank you all for showing up.